Yep, so I've started off the recording, and I guess just for the recording's sake, I'm going to be talking about HPE's cloud storage solutions and strategy. And yeah, I'll just jump from here. And then anybody who isn't on the call, we can share that link and they can see the same information. All right, so I guess I'm going to start high level. I don't want to be too salesy. I really want to talk more about what the solution does and kind of what the underlying technology and what it's like to consume it more. But before you step into that, you kind of have to understand, well, what's the vector we're coming from here when we're going at this? Because it's a little bit different, I think, at least from my experience with other cloud solutions. The concept is kind of threefold, right? That first of all, HPE kind of doesn't differentiate cloud from cloud, meaning that the concept is that we believe in hybrid cloud, that there's clouds on-prem and there's clouds in public cloud services, and that our strategy should be the same for both of those, and should be, I guess, homogeneous, if you will, in the way that we approach it and what the functionality should be. So that would be the same for private clouds. And then as part of that, data mobility then becomes key, right? If this is all one cloud or clouds that should be able to work interoperable together, then there needs to be data mobility, and that needs to be something that's pretty easy to do. And the third piece is, just because you're running it in a cloud doesn't mean you should give up the data services, the features, the capabilities, the resiliency, right, that you are used to having with enterprise storage solutions. And so with kind of those targets in mind, that's where we start building out our portfolio. Now, with those targets, though, there's definitely some things that stand in the way. And those type of challenges, are pretty ubiquitous no matter what when we're talking about cloud and hybrid cloud, historically speaking. A big part of that's fragmentation, right? Now you've got two different types of infrastructure underlying things, and that can become problematic because now you've fragmented things is from an administration standpoint, from a data movement standpoint, and certainly from a knowledge and an integration standpoint. Things are now cut up into silos. There's also issues around once you pick a service and you start putting your data with that service in the cloud, whether that's on-prem or you're a public cloud service offering, there's a lot of lock-in, and a lot of that has to do with the cost associated with not getting your data out of a particular service. And specifically when we talk about public cloud, they've designed around that, right? That's part of their business model is once they get you, they really do everything they can to keep you in there because that's how they make their money. The other thing you run into is if you're used to running particular applications on premise, there's certain types of features and capabilities that you're used to having. These enterprise, right, features, the cloning and snapshotting and resiliency type features, the ability to move things within a distributed platform. And so the question is, how do you, that inconsistency of the way things act on-prem compared to the way they act inside of a public service or a public cloud storage offering, how do you bridge that gap of that inconsistency of feature set? And then of course there's the cost associated with it. If we rewind, I don't know, 15 years, the sales pitch was it will be cheaper to go with the cloud. We've learned since then, and knowingly, we kind of knew this would land there as IT professionals, but it finally landed that it really isn't cheaper, but you go to the cloud for other reasons, right? There's flexibility, there's consumability, and those tend to be the bigger drivers, right? And how you want to consume your infrastructure rather than, all these capital assets and investments and whatnot. I just want to swipe my credit card for what I'm using that particular day, and I'll pay for that, and then I'll move on. And that tends to be the bigger driver, right? And so it's almost more a financial strategy as opposed to a technology strategy, but that then causes technology problems. So those are the things that we need to overcome, and those are the targets that we're trying to overcome with HPE's portfolio of products and services. Specifically, right, and when we're talking about enterprise data services for a unified experience, no matter which cloud you're in, on-prem or you're running in the public cloud, we've designed solutions that are going to support enterprise resiliency. So the same type of uptime, the same type of data durability that you're used to having on-prem, you should be able to have that in the cloud. By default, you don't. GCP or Amazon or Azure, they don't offer those same SLAs as you would if you were investing in an HPE or an EMC or solution on-prem for storing your data, right? Copy data management. How do I make copies of my data, place it where it needs to be, do it efficiently, and have it not cost $1 million to do it? Again, we're used to being able to do that because we have solutions on-prem that are designed to do that. How do we get that in the cloud? And so we've designed services that then will offer that, offer my optimized efficiency. A big piece of that is how do I make sure I'm only moving the data I have to move and that it's on the right tier of storage for what I'm going to be using it for, so that I'm not overpaying and I'm not storing too much, which then equals to overpaying. And the other piece that's going to be really key here is it's got to be automated. Historically speaking, when we talk about on-prem, automation has come in as an afterthought. And really just in the last 5 years has it become more mainstream. But when we talk about public cloud, automation is really what it's built on, that type of flexibility, and everything is software, right? Everything's accessed through API and is managed through scripting. And so if we're going to have something that's hybrid cloud, and we're going to offer all these other things, this enterprise and the copy data management and the efficiency, it still has to be automated the same way, right? We can't go back to the days of having to point and click to work through workflows. So there are multiple pieces or tiers, if you will, that are part of the HPE Cloud Storage portfolio. If we talk about our hot tier, this is the product that we call HPE Cloud Volumes. So this is the enterprise grade multi-cloud service for storing and managing in public clouds. Specifically, this is a cloud service. It's storage for public clouds, and it's literally enterprise grade, meaning the same type of capabilities that you're used to having on-prem with enterprise solutions. You can get that. And we're not just talking about performance, right? We're talking about all those other things, and we'll dig into that a little bit more. The second one is what we call our warm tier, which is our HPE, our Cloud Volumes Backup. So this is a securely and efficiently stored backup and recovery repository. Really, and again, consumed as a cloud service as opposed to an appliance or on-prem storage. And then the cold storage tier, which is our HPE Cloudbank storage, which is an extension of the backup solution that we have in our Store Once products, which basically it's archive tiering in the cloud is what that allows us to do. So I'm going to kind of walk through each one of these offerings and kind of what they do and where they're placed and what we use them for. But before I jump into those anymore, are there any questions or comments about anything I've talked about?
So the bank storage is like yeah, it is, okay. Archive tier, okay.
Yeah, it's an archive tier. And it's literally an extension of our Store Once backup products is what it allows us to extend on-premise tier 2 archive storage into the cloud. Yeah.
And so from a cost perspective, right, that's the cheapest one. I see the chart now, I see the
yeah, it is. So yep, coming right up here, that's about how it's going to run. And they built this out. I mean, I think part of it is for spacing, but there is some overlap too. And so depending on your use case and the workload that what you're doing, you know, 1 or 2 of these might actually be a good fit. And the nice part about that is then you can choose the one that's going to make the most sense for what you're doing. But yep, that's exactly right. The cost goes up this side, and then right, how quickly can I get my data back and can manipulate my data? That runs out this way. And that's how we kind of see those tiers. Not unlike how we tier storage on-prem, honestly.
Right.
So the first one I want to talk about is this hot tier, which is the enterprise grade HPE Cloud Volumes Block. And really what this is a cloud service that HPE offers that's enterprise grade. So if you want enterprise block storage and all the capabilities that come with a full enterprise SAN, all of the data feature sets, the replication, the snapshotting, the cloning, the high resiliency, the high uptime, the ability to cluster, all those things that we invest in for enterprise storage. If you want those for a cloud VM, that's what this tier of storage is really for. It's fantastic for taking on-prem stuff and moving it into the cloud for test dev. If you're just cloud, and you don't have anything on-prem with HPE or with anybody at all, you could literally use this so that you could get all those same feature sets, even though it's a cloud native application. And so it's really designed for business critical applications, not just, build up and tear down type of workloads. And because it has those replication capabilities, it does lend itself to be a good DR type of solution, where if you wanted one of your DR data centers and you didn't want to have to build up infrastructure and you wanted to run it in a public cloud, this could be a really good fit for that. So I'll kind of walk through those. So first of all, there's the hybrid cloud mobility for this particular piece. So if you're running HPE storage, specifically Nimble storage on premise, there's native integration for replicating volumes from the cloud to on-prem or on-prem to the cloud into HPE Cloud Volumes Block. And the beauty of this, though, is once you're in our cloud, you are adjacent to AWS and Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud Platform. And you can pick whichever platform you want to connect to as your compute layer. So we're basically your cloud storage provider, and then you choose your other one. And you don't have to pick one or the other either. You can connect the same data set or different data sets that you are running in HPE Cloud Volumes Block to whichever or multiple cloud service providers that you want. As I mentioned before, this is going to be the enterprise grade stuff, right? So there's actually 2 tiers of performance you can choose from within this service. And you could liken it to, well, what if I need high performance, like an all-flash array on-prem? You can pick a tier of performance within Cloud Volumes Block that will give you that same time of low latency, high throughput performance. Or you can pick something that would be more mid-range, right? As if you were running on like a hybrid system. And again, the beauty is, even though you're running these workloads, let's say in GCP, if you have a disagreement with GCP and you're like, no, we're moving our business to Azure, there's nothing to stop you from doing that. You own your data, right? And you can choose whichever cloud platform you want to connect it to. And you don't lose any visibility by doing that as well, because the visibility is through the Cloud Volumes platform itself. So talk a little bit about kind of what it is and what it's not, right? So when we're talking about Block, we're not talking about a replacement for like EBS or something like that. We're not competing with Azure and Google for their storage platforms. We're offering something that they really don't offer. And so it's going to be a little bit different use case than what historically people have been able to do. So a big piece is we're going to have better resiliency than what they have to offer, right? There's a really big difference between offering 5 nines of availability and 6 nines of availability. And I threw up this chart to kind of make a point of that, right? If the SLA with AWS says, well, we're going to be 5 nines or maybe 4 nines, it means that it's within their SLA that your application could be offline for minutes, right? And when we move into 6 nines, and 6 nines plus is the guarantee on Cloud Volumes, we're talking about seconds of downtime to be within your SLA. So now we're back into, again, what would you expect from an enterprise solution on-prem? We can expect that in the cloud as well. Durability is the same thing as well. If you look at your SLA for like an EBS instance, the SLA says basically you could lose 1 out of 500 volumes, meaning your data could literally just disappear and you would have no recourse. It's part of your service agreement. Now, we wouldn't expect that, nor would we tolerate that from an enterprise storage solution, right? We design around that. And so again, there's none of that type of solution. You don't lose data on HPE Cloud Volumes. You should expect the same type of durability and resiliency. Because it's enterprise class, in a normal like EBS instance, if you wanted to make a clone of your data, I've got to say I'm running a database, but I need to make a copy so I can run testing against it. What do I have to pay for? I have to pay for a full copy of that. But you're using zero cost clones in Cloud Volumes, much like as if you were running a Nimble storage array or a Primera storage array on-prem. This is thin provisioned, right? So you can utilize those same type of capabilities. You can make 500 copies of the same data set out of these clones, and you don't pay 1 cent more because you're not storing any more data. It's already there. It's just pointers back to the original stuff. So we're leveraging enterprise grade to be able to have that type of efficiency. And like I said, it is designed for hybrid environments. So being able to move data in and out of the cloud and at no cost. There's no egress fees and ingress fees for moving data in and out of cloud volumes, especially when you're doing that as a replication with an integrated nimble storage array on premise. So again, some real beauty where you get to own the data, which is what you'd expect, right, out of an enterprise solution. You get to choose where it's going to be, and you can choose where you're going to be connected and not be locked in. Some people, they'll look at this, oh, well, this is just a DR solution. And again, I just want to point out that this was designed to be used not just if you have HPE storage on-prem. In fact, you don't need to have any HPE storage on-prem in order to utilize this and the benefits of it as a primary storage platform for cloud. So if we want to like whiteboard out, how does this connect, right? If in Cloud Volumes, if I create a volume, I can connect that to a VM in Azure. And now I can take a snapshot of that, and I can do that on the fly, or I can set up a schedule and have regular snapshots just like you would on an on-prem solution. And then I can clone that, and it's a thin clone. So I'm not actually writing any new data. I've got a pointer back to that original data, so I don't have to pay any more for it because I'm not creating anything new. I'm not taking up more capacity. And then I can connect that to a different VM, and that could be in Azure or it could be in a different cloud if I wanted to. So now I've got I'm running my production server, but if I want to run some QA against that database or against that flat file structure, I can do that simply by cloning it. And because I'm not writing data, this is instantaneous and can all be scripted and automated. So I could create another cloud, and I can connect that up to a different cloud service provider. Let's say that I'm running an Oracle cluster in AWS, and I want a shared storage. Well, AWS and EBS doesn't really offer that option at all. You have to do some kind of weird things to get HA clustering for, say, a database that we're used to running on-prem, right? So, but you can do that now because now we're offering enterprise storage to the cloud. So you can literally set up HA clustering because you can actually share out your storage to multiple VMs. Theoretically speaking, and we've done some testing, you could do HA clustering in different clouds if you wanted to. And they set it up where they had one instance of SQL running in AWS and the other instance was running, or the other part of the cluster was running in Azure. And they were connecting to the same volume, and they were clustered so that if one of those cloud services were to go down, the application still stayed up and running. And then, of course, you can switch, right? You can disconnect this, and because it's sitting in HPE's cloud platform, you're not stuck in any of these other compute platforms. It's all managed as a portal. You don't have to manage infrastructure. This isn't like a virtual array or virtual storage platform. You literally say, I need X number of terabytes. Here's my tier of performance that I need. You know, you click a button, you put in your credentials for the service provider that you want, and then you're able to connect it with a script. And very good analytics and visibility into what you're using and whatnot. And then of course, there's the hybrid cloud piece, right? If you're running stuff on-prem, you want to move data in and out, no egress fees, no ingress fees for moving data between the two, but you can snapshot and replicate and then connect it up, or vice versa. Stuff that originates in the cloud then can be replicated back on-prem. And all of that is being managed and being monitored through InfoSight, our predictive analytics platform. This is how we can guarantee, more than 6 nines of availability. Any questions on Cloud Volumes Block and how that works?
Jonathan, can you talk a little bit about?
Are there any sort of?
All right, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, are there any sort of like quality of service performance specifications around this, or is it kind of limited to whatever your transport mechanism is?
Which aspect are you referring
like
to?
IOPS and such.
So absolutely.
For the going out to the cloud, like if.
So if you're talking about this link, right, the hybrid piece. So whatever your internet connection is going to determine how much data you can push from point A to point B. Something to keep in mind though is we're talking about asynchronous replication here, right? So you'll basically take a snapshot
Gotcha, okay.
on-prem, that snapshot replicates out, and then after the original data set is replicated, you're only sending deltas at that point in time, and compressed deltas, encrypted, right? So this is all, I point that out, this is all secured as well, right? We're not gonna send stuff live over the wire that people could get into. But this is asynchronous. So generally speaking, it's not really a performance issue. But I mean, if you've got, if you've got 50 terabytes of changed data that you're snapshotting and then replicating, if you've got a really small internet pipe, it might take a while for all that to move over. When we're talking about, performance on these other links, the truth is that this data network that we're using to connect up to the other service providers actually has lower latency and better performance than what they offer in their elastic storage solutions, mostly because it's designed for it and their solutions are not designed for performance. And in fact, specifically in Azure, we did some performance testing for some transactional databases, and we actually had half the latency of what the storage was on Azure's storage. So very good connections. And if you want to get under the covers from a technical standpoint, literally we have Ethernet links and we're running iSCSI connections between these VMs and our cloud storage platform. I mean, if under the covers, that's really what's going on.
Okay, and it sounds like you've got your own dedicated fiber for those links, so you're not sharing that traffic.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is you don't have to worry about any of that piece, right? We're managing and monitoring our own cloud service, and so as subscriptions come in, we're easily able to predict, our own bandwidth needs to make sure that we can offer consistent performance. But that's on us, and there are SLAs around that, both from an uptime standpoint and a performance standpoint. Yeah, it's a good question. Did that answer it okay?
Yep.
Cool. Rob, was there something else you wanted me to talk about?
I was just trying to think of, some example workloads that, Boeing would want to think about.
You are really smart. Here's a couple examples.
Wow.
And I'm just going to build these out. So these are two common ones that we run into a lot for Cloud Volumes Block. You're running a transactional database on-prem, and like most ERP or CRM systems, or whatever it happens to be, some business critical application that's running on top of a database, oftentimes there's a couple different things that you may run into. One is you need to be able to run that data set and the applications that are running on top of it through a test, dev, and a QA environment before it goes into production. The other one is you want a copy of that offsite, so if anything happens to your data center, then you're protected, right? DR. And Cloud Volumes Block is actually a good fit for either one of those type of solutions. In this case, right, if we're running it on-prem, we can simply snapshot it and replicate it out to the cloud. And we don't have to connect it at all to a cloud provider. It can literally just be sitting there ready to connect, right, in an automated fashion. And those volumes with your SQL database in them, if you did need to DR, you could literally fail this over, and this would become the primary owner of the data. This would become the replication target, and then you can connect it up and start running it. And when it's time to fail back, you do the exact same thing, only the other direction. So it works very well as a DR type of solution. I will say, from a technical standpoint, keep in mind that you're replicating volumes, and so what you're mounting to the cloud is what's in that volume. So if you are running, let's say you're running a Hyper-V environment or a VMware environment, if the volume is a data store, what's inside that? Well, really it's VM files, right, as opposed to the actual data set for the SQL server. So when you're building in a DR scenario based on this, you just have to keep in mind, how am I going to convert that volume into something that can be consumed by the cloud? And there's all kinds of tools out there that can do that kind of stuff. But just to be forthright, and as an engineer, those are the things I think about. The other piece that I see people use is they use the cloud as their burstable test dev environment. So especially if there is a high performance requirement for a very short period of time while you run dev testing against a workload, this is a beautiful way to do that. because you just simply pay for those VMs while you're using them. You've replicated it out. You have your volume. You thin provision a clone, connect it up to the VMs or the VM or set of VMs that you have. Run your tests against it. Then you can turn those VMs off. You're not paying for them anymore. You can delete that clone, and then you can just keep updating that data set. So whenever you're ready to run your next batch of testing, you've always got the updated data from production sitting right there in Cloud Volumes for you to connect to. So those are two really common use cases. Any other questions on that stuff? There was one more use case that I wanted to throw in here that is becoming much more popular, and that's the idea of utilizing this Cloud Volumes Block as a hybrid cloud mechanism for containers platforms. Specifically, that was literally my mom calling. Okay, so CI/CD pipelines is becoming a common use case. And the beauty of this is when you containerize any application and data set, it now becomes fully mobile. It's just a matter of getting the bits from point A to point B. And the Cloud Volumes Block solution with the ability to replicate on and off prem makes that really, really easy, so that you can do your build out of your pipeline, move it into the cloud, burst up, run the workload that you need to, but you're not tied into a particular cloud. So you can actually have the same data sets and be sharing them to different clouds if you have different groups that are using different service providers, as well as having that on-prem into your container platform or your container cloud, if you will, on-premise. So there's another use case that has become very, very popular. And again, that's all because it's automated through API, right? So every instruction of building a volume, cloning a volume, connecting to a volume, all of that can be automated and is automated through the same type of scripting and tools that you would to manage any container platform, right? Kubernetes basically for all your automation. Another question sometimes I get is, well, that's great, but if we're in the cloud, where are you located? And we've got, right now, there's HPE Cloud Volumes in the East and West in the US, in Europe, and also there's in Japan, in the APAC area. This is gonna continue to expand as demand increases. But this is where we're located right now and where we have direct connects into the cloud service providers. Just because my screen is covered up, what time is it, guys?
11:39.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we got it, okay.
So Jonathan, I had a question. Can you hear me?
Sorry about that.
Jonathan, you still out there?
Yeah, I am, sorry. Somebody was just calling me, so I gotta mute my phone. Okay.
All
So
right, let me know when you're ready. So I had a quick question. So how does this, I mean, how does this compare price-wise to just architecting the app to be more resilient? If let's say performance is not a characteristic of an app that requires storage, how does this, cost compare? I mean, why would somebody do this to utilize Cloud Volumes versus just creating an application that is, on multiple VMs and in different clouds, let's say?
So it's a really good question. So if you want to do a comparison of cost per gig, right? It's almost a wash. And again, we're talking about the performance tier, EBS, like in AWS, is almost the same cost per gig as what Cloud Volumes is. In fact, it is basically 10 cents, right? But the difference is where you actually start saving money using the Cloud Volumes when you start taking into account egress and ingress fees. And also the other piece is if you do any type of cloning of your data and snapshotting of your data, it doesn't cost anything to do that on the cloud volumes. It does cost to do that on the other platforms. And again, it depends on how you're utilizing those clones and whatnot. But I mean, if you're just using, cloud storage and you don't need the enterprise features, you're not really going to get a huge cost savings, but you start getting a cost savings when you start designing for that other piece. So for instance, you brought up, well, what if I just build in my resiliency and I simply have my application designed to run in multiple clouds? You can totally do that. But at that point in time, now you're storing the data multiple times, right? And so now you're actually paying for twice as much data as what you would be putting in cloud volumes. And the cost per gig is the same. So literally you'd be paying twice as much. Plus the networking and the cost of moving data, right? If you're going to replicate between different clouds, you're going to be paying for every bit you send outside of AWS and you bring into Azure. So I guess to answer your question, there's a huge cost savings associated with that if you're using those enterprise features. Did that answer your question, Felix? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Jonathan.
Cool. So the second tier down, the warm tier, is what we call Cloud Volumes Backup. And this is built on the same infrastructure and into the same cloud as Cloud Volumes Block. But rather than presenting itself as iSCSI volumes, if you will, it presents itself as an object. Well, it's really Catalyst is what it is. And it's an HPE developed object store for backup. And so that the concept here, right, is that you can back up HPE and non-HPE storage very, very quickly, directly to the cloud or as a second tier of backup storage. It's a plug and play service, meaning you go and you say how much space you have, you want to buy, and then you pay for that. You don't have to provision anything for this to go on. You've got access in and out that's going to be secure. It's going to be very efficient. When you're backing up to an HPE Cloud Volumes Backup, that Catalyst store that we use allows source side deduplication, meaning you reduce all of your data before you copy it across the wire and you stick it into the Cloud Volumes Backup repository. The beauty of this too is you now have a lot of flexibility on what you do with your restore. So it's sitting in the cloud. You can restore it back on-prem, or you can restore it into any cloud provider that you want. You can convert that volume, that repository, into a Cloud Volumes Block volume if you wanted to, connect it directly to a VM and then run it. So you can actually then start taking your backup data and do stuff with it besides just DR or file level restores if you wanted to. So for this particular solution, right, we still have the same portal that we'd log into, a central place to go and to manage this. Again, you're not managing any infrastructure. You're really just saying, here's my repositories. These are the sizes I want them to be. And then you've got the information and the credentials associated with connecting to those from on-prem. There is going to be native integration. If you're running HPE storage platforms, we have native tools that basically will allow you to copy volumes off an HPE storage platforms directly into the Cloud Volumes Backup. But it doesn't have to be. So it can really be a repository for any data source that you've got, which would include any vendor's storage array, as long as you're using an ISV backup solution that is Catalyst enabled. And many of the biggest names out there are, and I put some up here, Commvault, Beam, Veritas, Micro Focus, they all are Catalyst enabled, meaning they can talk to Cloud Volumes or any Catalyst store, which is what we use on our Store Once backup appliances. And so basically now you're able to optimize that data as you're protecting it, send only the change data or the smallest compressed and deduped data across the wire, and then put that into the Cloud Volumes platform. You can recover that back on-prem, or you can recover into the cloud of your choice. Sorry, I hit the wrong arrow. So any questions about the Cloud Volumes Backup solution and how that works? I'm going to talk a little more about the features here in a minute, but hopefully kind of the architecture and the layout and the access makes sense. Cool. So some of the other key things, right, is that When you back up to Catalyst, your backups are now invisible to ransomware attacks. Very common, we put our backups on local disk or on NAS storage, which is all visible from your application networks, and one of the very first targets that ransomware goes after is backups. It encrypts your backup before it even goes in and encrypts your application so that you can't do the restore and you have to pay the ransom. It's going to be fully encrypted off-site, so even in flight and at rest. It's going to have secure isolation. So one of the things people say, well, if I'm putting my backups in this service, is it getting mixed up with other people's backups? And it's not. It's a multi-tenancy solution, and everything is isolated and secured and encrypted on its own. And it's resilient. It's like I said, it's running on the same infrastructure and the same cloud platform as the block. So you still get 6 nines of availability for the solution. I already kind of talked about most of this. Again, a big piece of being able to utilize that Catalyst backup is you don't have to send as much data, so it's a lot less bandwidth intensive. And again, you aren't paying any egress fees either. So now we're just talking about what's the cost of your internet connection. Putting the data in doesn't cost you anything. Pulling the data out for a restore doesn't cost you anything. Just storing it. And let's see, I'm actually gonna, I already walked through how most of this stuff works. So I'm gonna jump a couple of these slides. So when we're talking about hybrid cloud solutions with Cloud Volumes Backup, here's a couple examples. Do backup and recover on-premise or recover to the cloud. So again, Oracle database, running on my 3PAR, my Nimble storage array. I can utilize RMC, which is our native tool, to make a copy of that data and put it into Cloud Volumes Backup. Again, I could also use any of those other third-party ISVs to do something similar if I wasn't running HPE storage. I can then clone that backup and connect it up. I can run test dev against it. I can do a little restore. I can use that as a migration path to move a data set into the cloud. And then I can do the same thing the other direction, right? Or I can also restore this to another data center in the case of DR, or back to the original data center. Yeah, and the other one is just this is the other solution, right? If we're running somebody else's storage, we're not limited. We still have those same capabilities. There's a couple more steps, right? And now you're putting, say, if you're running Commvault, you're putting a Commvault wrapper around that data before you place it into Cloud Volumes, where if you use the native RMC solution, it's not going to be wrapped up that same way, and there's going to be some native integration into the Cloud Volumes itself. But basically, the movement can all work out the same as far as where you want to restore to. Once it's in backup, you can restore it to another data center using that same ISV, or using that ISV running in the cloud, you can restore it to a VM in any cloud service provider that you choose. And the last tier, the cold tier, is the Cloudbank storage. And so the concept here is, this is, like I said, is an extension of the HPE Store Once solution that we have, which is our backup appliance. That backup appliance we sell as a piece of hardware with the Store Once software running on it. It is basically a local Catalyst store, but it can be back-ended or extended into AWS or Azure onto their blob storage, and or even into their Glacier or cold tier storage. So you get a much better price per gig, but then getting that data back, you have to utilize the Store Once to get that stuff back, but it does allow you to extend your storage footprint into a much cheaper per gig type of solution in the cloud without having to buy more infrastructure. That's kind of the short term. And you just need an ISV that can talk Catalyst in order to do that stuff. So the same ones that you can use to back up to the Cloud Volumes Backup repository as well. And again, there's multi-cloud support there as well. The Cloudbank storage, though, is not a service per se, as it is a licensing that you buy from HPE that extends the Store Once storage into the cloud of your choice. I guess I will point out this as well. You can buy that store once as an appliance from us, and there's different sized appliances depending on how big your on-site repository needs to be. It can also run as a VM. So you could actually have just basically a software-based store once and then extend that whole backup or archive tier into the cloud right out of that VM. And that's pretty much the 3 tiers of cloud storage and the solutions and our strategy at HPE for cloud storage and where we're at today. Any other questions, comments? I'm hoping quiet means I covered things well and that there aren't any questions as opposed to you fell asleep.
Hey guys, I'm curious, would this be interesting to like a Duke McMillan or a Conrad Kimball or that team, Brad Schaefbauer, those guys on the cloud side? Any ideas?
Maybe. I'm not sure how it would work in the context of like enterprise hosting, but on the OpenStack and container stuff that they're doing now, there might be some interest there. Although that's all migrating into VMware, and I know there's some of the Cloud Foundation and VMware that's doing some of these sort of things.
Is there capabilities in VCF that, is that what you're referring to, Malin?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know they were doing specifically this kind of capability.
No, there's some elements of it. It's not a feature compare in any way,
Okay.
shape, or form. It's just some of the things of the hybrid cloud elements of the
Right.
Cloud Foundation and bounce storage out.
Yeah, so the trick is going to be is how important is that particular data set going to be, and do you want it running on an enterprise solution or do you want to running it on EBS? And I mean, even if you do, Cloud Foundation and you're migrating and you can move VMs freely, right, from one cloud into another cloud, that's great. But when it's running in Azure, what if your VM disappears and you're still under SLA? Is that a workload that you can allow that for? Some workloads, it's not that big of a deal. And so that's why in a lot of ways, especially with the block storage solution, it's targeted toward enterprise applications that you expect uptime, you expect durability and resiliency for. So sometimes though, when we're talking about containers, it's, those can be blown away at any given point in time, and it's usually not as big of a deal, but it just depends what your use cases are. We're finding that more people are considering and moving to the idea of moving their actual enterprise applications out of standard virtual environments like VMware and into containers environments purely for the mobility capabilities of doing that.
Right.
Right.
I'll reach out to I think because a lot of the things that Duke is doing in Azure, this might be a gap he has, especially for some of the I'm just brainstorming now, but yeah, you think about that.
Cool, Rob.
Hadn't really thought about it, so.
So from a IoT perspective and out at the edge, do you guys have customers that are utilizing some of these services? And I guess this is for Will and Jose, who I think had to drop, but are there specific use cases that you guys are seeing? How's that working? And with some of the data regulations, I guess you mentioned that part of your storage pieces are not in the U.S. I guess they're international. And with the the fact that we have to connect to kind of a U.S. Gov clouds only, how does that? I mean, how do you see other customers going against some of those hurdles as well?
Well, that's always kind of a tricky.
Yeah, I think that's
there.
Go ahead, say that again, Felix. Or was that Will?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I think it's still something we're trying to sort out. I know most of my work has been kind of on the NASA side now, which, adds a completely new layer of complexity to everything. So yeah, we're still trying to kind of figure out the best way to go about that. Definitely been making some strides in, getting the more public cloud approval, especially at the government level too. Just 4 or 5 years ago, or even longer, that wasn't really a thing. So it seems like we're making some good progress in that area anyway.
Yeah, certainly.
I guess the
Go ahead, Felix.
Sorry, Jonathan. You just sometimes come in a little bit choppy, so we're not intentionally interrupting you. I think it just happens that way. But yeah, okay. So I think back to, are there pieces of this that could only be run in Gov Clouds? I guess is the underlying question. I think some of these applications might want to use this, but they might have that requirement.
Yeah, so you have to think of it as now it's a separate service, right? So you run your VMs in GovCloud, and now you're compliant, right? Because that's what GovCloud is designed to do. So the question is, what are the compliance requirements, and does HPE Cloud Volumes as a service meet those requirements as well? And in many cases, it does. There are some compliance, some security compliance that we have not certified yet, and we're still in the process of working on. So we'd have to just look at that and see, depending on what the requirements are for your particular solution.
Okay. Fair enough.
But I mean, the basic stuff.
And from a use case perspective, no, I was just gonna say, and from a use case perspective, the second part of my question, have you seen what other use cases for like IoT are you guys seeing? Are you guys seeing containers, data collectors out there running? Or can you talk about that at all? I guess what's the landscape look like for like IoT based apps or things out at the edge?
I might pitch that to Rob, actually. I don't know, Rob, do you have any comments about IoT and what you're seeing trend wise?
So specifically around leveraging some of these services, is that what you're asking, Felix?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know this. I know that, if you think about where the workload's headed, everything is getting containerized, even micro containerized. I just worked with a company that actually has tiny containers that sit on chips, for example, right? So they're pushing that out there. That's driving a need to do some analysis there, and then obviously put it up into a data collector. So absolutely, these kind of capabilities are getting leveraged to move that data around more dynamically, and because it tends to be high cost in doing it the traditional way. So what Jonathan was talking about earlier, it's like you put something up there and then it dies. So yeah, we're seeing some trends doing that. It's a little early, to be fair, but it is happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be maybe next steps if we do talk to the Conrads and things of the world out there, because I know some of their containerized workloads that they're looking for are going to be more at the edge, I think. And so it'd be good to show them example companies maybe that are doing that already and the benefits that they're seeing.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, we have our own container.
Good idea.
There's the container platform that we utilize, our Esmeralda container platform, has a hybrid expandable storage platform that runs within it that allows you to move stuff in and out of the cloud. That would be separate from these services that we offer. But when we're talking about edge, that's really more the idea, right? Is you would deploy our container platform, which would include data services, and then it's natively hybrid in that particular case. So it will move the data for you basically to where it needs to be once you need to start doing things with it. So you're collecting it on an edgeline server, right? Running a stack, a container stack, but the data platform that's integrated with that is also running in Amazon, or it's running in GovCloud. So we certainly have those capabilities as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jonathan. So there's an example out there, guys, that a very large telecom is got about 60,000 different 5G devices out there that they're rolling out. Each one of those, the workload is extremely important, obviously, to offer their services back. So what they've done is they've completely containerized that. And those containers are constantly being updated. They have the throughput, which is fine because they're the provider leveraging 5G. So they've actually using 5G to update their containers and update their platform that, again, you and I would consume every day. And that's all based upon Edgeline, for example. So they took that. Now they're also connecting that to their own private cloud, which is OpenStack, I believe. It's their own version of OpenStack to actually do the ongoing management and analysis of the data we're using. So another example, and they're backing up all of that data probably in a very similar manner to what we've talked about here. They're not using ours, but they are using these types of services.
Well, I think we're past the top of the hour. Thanks for the questions, guys, and the interaction. I appreciate it. I hope it was interesting, at least, and you felt like it was a good use of your time. I'll send out a copy of my deck. I'm going to add in some additional slides with links to other resources about this stuff so that you can look at. And also, I'm going to stop the recording.